Hi everyone, I'm Chef Susie with Escoffier. Welcome to our live session this morning. Today we're going to be making a few fondant roses. This is something that's super easy, simple to do, and with fondant gaining in popularity, I thought that you guys would like this morning. So let's talk about fondant first. So fondant is a pliable mixture, and I have some here that I made earlier. And this is a mixture of powdered sugar. It has gelatin and shortening. It'll have a sugar substance, glycerin, sometimes a little bit of glucose in it, and vanilla. And typically, when you make fondant, you'll use a clear vanilla because you'll want to start out with something that's pure and something that's white, just like this. And if you use a dark vanilla, you're going to hinder your color a little bit unless you're going really dark, but I do recommend a clear vanilla. You can use a lot of other flavors as well. You can use coconut or lemon or even a little bit of orange extract, but keep in mind, try to use those clear extracts. So with fondant, fondant is great for covering cakes with, as well as making flowers like I'm going to be showing you today. But keep in mind that fondant is going to stay soft. It's not going to get really hard. And you may be asking yourself, hey, I've seen some of those flowers that are really hard. And those are made of something different that's also pliable, and it's called gum paste. And the major difference with fondant and gum paste is fondant has gelatin and shortening, and gum paste is going to have egg whites, and that's going to be the drying factor. The nice thing about gum paste is you can roll it really thin. You can get super thin petals for your roses, but it's not so good for covering cakes with. It's mostly for decoration. So if you wanted to explore something a little bit different, what I'll do oftentimes is I'll mix half fondant and half gum paste, because you kind of get the beauty of a little bit of drying and you can roll it a little bit thinner. We have a question. Hmm? Oh, the question is, can you eat both? Fondant and gum paste are edible as long as the ingredients that you're putting in these are edible. So you can easily make your own. You may see fondant made with marshmallows these days, and there's gelatin in marshmallows, so that's going to be the gelatin factor. That fondant is a little bit, to me, it's a little bit more fluffy. So I like to make a traditional fondant, and keep in mind you can buy fondant and gum paste readily available these days. And if you're using a very deep color, maybe a black or a navy or real dark blue or red or bright yellow, you might want to explore buying that, because you're going to have to buy a lot of gel paste to color that. So speaking of coloring fondant, let's start with this. Okay, so for coloring fondant, I always wear my gloves, because if I'm coloring green, I don't want to get that in my blue or my yellow, or especially my pink. So I recommend wearing gloves to do this. So for coloring fondant, it's great to use these paste colors that they sell, but you can also use the regular McCormick colorings that you can buy in the grocery store, like these. But the pastes are great too, and you can buy these at places like the craft store or even online. This is the Wilton brand, and as you can see, this box that I bought of assorted colors, it's pretty much got every color in the rainbow in here. So let's go ahead and do a little bit of coloring. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to make just a little bit of kind of like a creamy color with some of the yellow that we have here. So we can take a look at this. All right, so when I'm coloring my fondant, what I'll do is I don't put my color right in my fondant. I kind of put it on the side here, so I'm not so wedded to it unless I know how much I really need. But I've not done this one before, so I'm just going to make a little bit of yellow. And I'm kind of going for something a little bit creamy, so I'm just going to add a little piece of my yellow. This is kind of what I use for control. So you can do it any way you like, but this is how I really control my coloring and my fondant. Please let me know if you have any questions along the way. This is super pliable. If you're going to be working on this for a little while, you're going to want to keep it covered because it'll get a crust on it, a little skin. But we're going to be kind of working a little quickly here, so we're not going to be covering these. Okay, I'm going to go with a little bit more yellow. Like I said, I'm looking for a little bit of a creamy color. And then what I'll do is I'll save these little color pieces. I'll wrap them up. Fondant, you can wrap it, store it at room temperature. Great to be stored at room temperature. You can store it in the refrigerator too. Okay, so now I've got a nice creamy color. All right. So when you're working with fondant, you can use a little bit of powdered sugar. I like to use a blend of powdered sugar and cornstarch. But you don't want to add too much to this. I only use it when things start getting sticky and I really, really need it. So we have a nice creamy color here. I'm just going to add a little touch more yellow and then we'll be all set. Okay, so please let me know if you have any questions or if you've worked with fondant before. It's fun to explore, super easy to work with, very pliable. If you make fondant and it's, cracking when you're doing this, check to see if it's too cold. If it's not cool, you want to add a little bit of water. You can put some on your hands or you can try to mix in a little bit. So what's nice about fondant is it's not like your cookies and it's not like your bread. It doesn't have any gluten in it or wheat flour, so you don't have to worry about over mixing it. So you can kind of just go with that. All right, so we're going to make a little bit of green here. So we'll make a few leaves today. All right, so I'm going to be using this gel paste that I got. I've got a little bit of a Kelly green. I'm just going to use a little bit here. Okay, what I'm going to do is, I think I'm going to make a little piece of green first. All right, now be careful with these colors because they kind of jump out at you a little bit. Okay, almost done mixing colors, guys. Please let me know if you have any questions. Okay, so I've got a little bit of green here. All right, what was I doing with this? I think I'll just put it in there. All right, so I've got a nice green color here. So what I like to do with my leaves is I kind of like to make them look a little bit more natural. This is a pretty green color. You can also buy a leaf green, but what I'll do is I'll put a little bit of chocolate in here. So I've got a little bit of ganache over here. I'm going to go grab a little bit. Okay, so I'm just going to put maybe a smidgen, maybe a little bit more chocolate in here. And this is really going to tone this down a little bit. Then it's not so bright, it looks a little bit more earthy. You can do this with some brown coloring. Okay, we're going to go a little bit more earthy. I'm going to grab a little bit more chocolate. A little ganache there. Okay, so green is pretty much the only color that I do this with, and I just kind of calm it down a little bit. All right, so let's go ahead and make a little bit of blue next, and then we'll start on some of our flowers. We're going to do some leaves too, and please let me know if you have any questions along the way, okay? So we've got a nice green going on here for our leaves, and you can make whatever tones that you like. And we have a question. The question is, does this attract moisture after it's made? It can if you're in a very humid climate. So you'll want to be mindful of storing your fondant. If you're making some flowers, you can put these in an airtight container. And you don't want to refrigerate your fondant if it's really moist. Maybe just a fondant cake, I'll refrigerate it overnight, but really not much more than that. And I'm going to put on some clean gloves while we do our blue. And please let me know if you have any questions along the way. Okay, we're going to make a little bit of blue. Not sure if you can see over here, but I have a little blue cake started for us, and we're going to put some of our flowers on there today. Okay. So this is going to give you an idea how long it's going to take to color your fondant. So if you have a cake and you're making a large cake and you're making a lot of flowers, make sure that you're allowing yourself enough time for the coloring the fondant if you're not going to buy it. And this is a great job for an assistant to do as well. Getting a little warm in here. I'm having trouble getting my gloves on. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and make a little bit of blue here. I'm going to be a little more daring with the blue, and I'm going to add it right to the fondant here because I kind of know how much I need. I made some of this earlier. And just want to get a little bit of a light blue color. When I'm doing my flowers, I like to go a little bit lighter, but it's really what you like. Okay. So we've got a nice light blue going here. And please let me know if you have any questions along the way. One color you're going to want to be mindful of when you're making icings and fondant flowers is purple. It has a tendency to fade, so you're going to want to keep that out of the light. Okay. All right, so you've got some nice colors here. I'm going to go ahead and set this aside. So let's go ahead and make some roses. We have a little bit of green here. You want any colors that are going to jump out, you kind of want to keep them away as much as you can. All right, so we're going to start out with a couple of ribbon roses. These are super easy to make, and they look absolutely beautiful if you have them kind of scrolling down a cake. So what you can do is, it's a little warm in here, so I'm probably going to have to use a little bit of my powdered sugar and the cornstarch. If you're working when it's a little bit warmer, it's a little humid here today too, you may need to use a little bit of, help here. Okay, so with ribbon roses, I just usually kind of take my fondant and I'll kind of either press it or roll it. And you're going to kind of just twist up this little bit of ribbon here. So these little rolling pins that you can buy are great, but you can easily do this just on your own without any tools. You can just press, you can use a rolling pin, you can use a bottle. So I'm just showing you some simple techniques today that you can use without buying a lot of tools. Okay, so for the ribbon rose, what you're going to do is you're just going to twist this. And what I like to do is I kind of start pressing towards the middle and try to keep that center part open. And here we have a classic ribbon rose. So these are beautiful and they're super easy to make, and you can just kind of cascade these down the side of a cake and they're absolutely gorgeous. You can make a whole bunch of these very quickly. So with the ribbon rose, you can also do some cutout petals on here. So let's show you another ribbon rose. We'll do a little bit of a smaller one. Okay guys, be sure to let me know if you have any questions. You're kind of quiet today. Okay, like I said, you really don't need any tools to do this, or just a few. You don't have to, there's a lot out there, there's a lot available. But you can kind of, work on your own. I picked up this little one not long ago, and it comes in handy. I have a few small ones like this, but you don't really need it. You could easily press this. Okay. All right, so here we are with another classic ribbon rose. I think these are one of my favorites. I really love them. So what we can do with the ribbon rose too is we can add a couple of petals to this. Oops. Don't worry about your bases if they're too big like that. I'm going to show you how to trim those when we're done. Okay. All right. So we've got our ribbon rose, and let's go ahead and make a couple of petals for it. When I do petals, I like to cut mine out. You can just form them, but everyone does it a little bit different. I'm a petal cutter. How about you guys? Do you cut them or do you just form them? Not hearing anything. Okay, that's okay. All right, let's go with a couple this size, basic size. Okay, so now for the fun part. If you need help sticking your petals to your base of your rose, it's typical to use a little bit of vodka. I have Smirnoff here. Anything will work. What's nice about using vodka is it's going to, the alcohol in it is going to dissolve. You can use a little bit of water if you're opposed to alcohol. You can also use a little bit of rose water, which is going to give your roses a little bit of a rosy flavor. So you can just kind of paint this on your petal a little bit to help it out, or on the base of the rose. Just want it just enough to make it tacky. Okay, and some chefs have been known to drink their vodka. That's a whole nother show, but we have a question.
Can you actually paint on fondant, like adding a darker color in the center of the rose to lighten the edges?
We have a question. Can you actually paint on fondant, color in the center of the rose? You absolutely can. You can color your vodka a little bit and do your painting, and then it's going to dissolve, and then you'll have your color there. So let's go ahead and stick our petal on our ribbon rose. So we've got a couple of petals added here just for a little bit of a different effect. Sticking these on with a little bit of vodka. This is getting a little sticky. It's awfully warm in here. So this is going to give your rose just a little bit of a different effect. So I'm doing a little bit of pinching here, and we have a little bit of wilting because it's a little hot in here, but this is a basic idea. Okay. All right. We are done with ribbon roses. Let's move on to some leaves real quick, and then we'll make some petal roses. Okay, so leaves, the fun part. Easy to make. You can use a cutter. I brought a cutter with me today. You can cut these by hand. Like I said, you really don't need a lot of tools to do this. So you can just, have any basic cutters or rolling pin, or you can even press these out by hand. Okay, so let's make a few leaves. We'll give you a little idea on our leaves. And I'm kind of really attached to my little rolling pin today. It's a little unusual for me. I think it's because it's hot in here. Oftentimes I'll press my fondant, but to get a little bit of a smoother top on it, you want to roll it out. Some sort of a rolling pin. Like I said, you could even use a bottle. Okay. You don't want this to get too thin. A little bit of sticking here. You can also roll these out on a mat, a baking mat, like this one here. This works perfect. The silicone mat, great for rolling out fondant as well. So if you're having a little trouble with sticking, you don't want to use a little bit of the powdered sugar, you can try the mat. Okay, so I've got some leaf cutters here. Let's go ahead and explore a couple of these sizes. And with the leaf cutter, you can, easily cut this by hand. I'll show you a few of those too. I have these fluted ones that I like to use, and I just think they're beautiful. They have a little bit of a twist on them. Okay. If you've got sticking, you can stick your cutter in the powdered sugar. I try to stay away from that if I can, just so it doesn't get that chalky look to it, but sometimes you really don't have a choice, especially in these hot and humid days. Okay, so you can use a knife, you can use a small X-Acto knife like this little tool, and you can cut your own leaves too. You don't have to use a cutter, you can do this. Hmm. If it's not too warm in your kitchen. This is pretty sharp. You're going to want to make sure that you use something sharp. And we do have another question.
Did you make the fondant or buy it?
Hmm?
Did you make the fondant or buy it?
The question is did you make the fondant or buy it? I do have some that I made earlier, and I bought some as well. So I think that some of the fondants are great products, and excuse me, I use them often myself. So I definitely recommend making the fondant, and then after you explore making it, you know how to make it. If you've got a lot to do and you want to try buying it, then I recommend buying a little bit too, just to explore the different kinds. But this is something that you're going to want to know how to make. Okay, so with the leaves, of course, we want a little bit of veining on here. You can buy a mat where you can press veins into it. You can also use the back of a silk leaf where they have the plastic veining, or you can just do a little bit with your knife here, or a little knife tool that I have. You just want to do a little bit of finishing touch on here. And since leaves in nature, not always perfect, kind of do them a little randomly. Okay, any questions on leaf making? You can also use the vodka that we talked about with the coloring and paint on the leaves. Beautiful for those fall colors, the reds and the oranges. All right. So that was pretty quick and easy. Like I said, you can buy some mats to make these veins into leaves, but you can easily do them yourself.
How many days does the fondant keep?
Hmm?
How many days does the fondant keep?
We have a question, how many days does the fondant keep? You can keep it quite some time. As long as it's wrapped up really well. I'll usually keep mine at room temperature and, for a couple of weeks, but if I find that I'm keeping it for longer, I'll store it in the refrigerator, but I would say you could easily keep it for a month as long as it's sealed. Okay, your leaves, you can pinch them on the ends a little bit to give them a little bit more contrast here. Okay, so we've got some ribbon roses and we've got some leaves here for our cake. So let's go ahead and make a few petal roses. And please let me know if you have any questions. Okay, so for petal roses, I like to roll out my petals. What you can do is you can roll them and you can cut them, or you can just kind of roll them singly. You can press them in between some parchment or even some wax paper. So you really don't need a cutter at all. But Chef Susie likes to use a cutter, so we're going to go ahead and use a cutter. And please let me know if you have any questions on anything. It's getting a little warm in here, so I'm going to put a little bit extra of my cornstarch and powdered sugar mixture. Do you have a question?
How long will the flowers keep once you make them?
Okay, so how long will the flowers keep once we make them? They can last for weeks as long as you're in a dry climate. And if it's humid, you're definitely going to want to store them in an airtight container. What I'll do, because I'm in the Midwest here, and oftentimes it's not really humid, I'll leave mine dry out for a few days in the kitchen, and I'll put them on a pan and I'll cover them with a little bit of parchment. and I leave them dry out before I use them or even before I store them. I hope that helps. Okay, so we're going to make a few petals here. Okay, so there's a couple of different approaches that you can take with your petal rose making. So let's go ahead and explore a few of these. All right, if you've got a good amount of powdered sugar on here like I do, you're going to want to brush it off. And you don't want to have any of this chalkiness. Okay, I'm going to roll this just a little bit more. I think this is in the shape of, I don't know, a pool? Chef Susie is not so good at rolling out her shapes well all the time. Okay, so I usually roll these to about 1/16 of an inch, and if you're having trouble with them wilting, if it's too warm for you, you might have to roll them a little bit thick, but definitely explore some different shapes and sizes. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut out some petals here, and then we'll do a little bit of assembly. And please let me know if you have any questions. It's getting a little sticky in here, so I'm using that powdered sugar mixture that I made. As you can see, I'm getting a little stuck here. Since it's tacky in here, I'm probably not going to be adhering these petals with any of the vodka or any water or any rose water, since things are getting a little sticky. So that's okay. If it sticks on its own, it's even better. Okay, so we've got some petals here. Typically with roses, you'll make these with odd number petals. So let's go ahead and move this up. Okay, so let's explore a few ideas here. What you can do is you can take these petals just the way they are. And this is kind of a simple way to do this. And you can just roll them up, then you'll have a small rose together. Keep in mind when you're forming the center, you want it to be a little spirally and a little bit pretty. And then what I'll do is I'll open these up a little bit of pinching. Pretty rosebud, super easy to do. Okay, so another thing that you can do is you can make a little bit of a base for your rose. And please let me know if you have any questions. Okay, so what you can do is you can make a little bit of a base for your rose, a little bit of a cone for your petals to go around. And with your petals too, you can take a tool. You can, oops, I had a little bit of blue on me. See what I mean about these colors? Oh, they jump out at you. Let me cover that one up. Otherwise, we'll have blue on the green and on the cream, and here and there and everywhere, right? Okay, so what you can do if you want, you can buy these little mats, or you can use any little piece of foam to roll some of your petals on. And you could use a little tool like this or anything that has a little bit of a round edge to it. So what we're going to do, and you'll see this oftentimes with the gum paste, but what we're going to do is we're just going to kind of thin out these edges on this rose, these rose petals, and we're just going to be making this a little bit more delicate. And there's a lot of tools out here for doing this. And we'll make a few of these little delicate petals here. Things are a little sticky in here today. They're not quite as delicate as I would want them to be. So as you can see, they're getting a little bit bigger here. And like I said, this is really helpful when you're doing the gum paste because you can get them a little bit thinner. And I'm just kind of rolling. I like to leave a little bit of a center on mine because it kind of helps push this rose out a little bit. And you can also pinch these edges too and make them a little more thin and a little bit more delicate. And any little tool will work. They do sell these little specialty tools and mats too. All right, so let's go ahead and assemble our rose. We may have to pinch it a little bit along the way. Okay, so these are a little bit drier, so we're going to go ahead and pull out our pack a little bit. Okay, so what you're going to want to do is spiral this around a little bit. And then what you're going to do is you're going to overlap your petals. That's going to give them that classic rose look. I like to save the bigger ones for the outside. I think I went the wrong way here. So see how I'm overlapping the petal? Perhaps Susie went the wrong way. Okay. This is a beautiful petal rose. And I'm going to just thin these out a little bit. This is a little rosebud. I like to pinch these little thin edges a little bit. And keep in mind, it's a flower, and in nature, they don't always look perfect. So let's go ahead and we'll make another rose before we say our goodbyes. And please let me know if you have any questions on anything, and you can message me as well. So does anyone have any questions before we wrap up? Okay. Okay, so these little guys are a little sticky, so we should be able to form them on here pretty easily. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to twist this around a little bit to help it get started. And if your base is a little too thick, don't worry about it. We can always cut it off. A little pair of scissors, you can use a small knife. So what I'm doing is I'm just overlapping these pieces a little bit. Okay, so you have a nice little 5-petal rose. Just kind of bringing these petals out a little bit. Okay, oh, we've got some questions while I was looking at the petals. Okay, questions?
If making a large wedding cake, could you dry the flowers to use later?
Could you dry the flowers?
To use later?
I didn't hear you, I'm sorry.
To use later?
Oh, okay. If you're making a wedding cake, you're using a lot of these flowers, can you make them in advance and dry them and use them later? Absolutely. And you'll want to work ahead, and then this way you can take your time with them and let them dry out pretty well. Keep in mind, as we mentioned earlier, fondant is not going to dry all the way. And the gum paste will dry all the way, but fondant is a little softer. As you can see, my petals were wilting a little bit today, and it's just a little bit of a softer thing to work with. So let's go ahead and add our flowers to our cake real quick. So I've got a cake here that I made earlier, and I just covered it with some blue icing, and then I just kind of poured some ganache over it part way, and I have a few little sprinkles here. A good thing to anchor your roses would be buttercream. If you're doing a fondant cake, you could also anchor these with some royal icing as well. So let's go ahead and put a couple of our flowers on. What we're going to do is we're going to trim them up a little bit, and we're going to pop them up with a little bit of buttercream. And please let me know if you have any questions. And it is best to leave these sit a little bit, let them dry, let them firm up. So what I'm going to do is I'm trimming this a little bit on the bottom.
When making,
Mhm.
when making specialty cakes like this, how far in advance do you start these?
Okay, so we have a question, making specialty cakes like this, how far advanced can you make them? The roses, you can kind of work on these all week long or even the weeks before. But the cake, as far as storing it in the refrigerator, depending on how warm your refrigerator, how moist your refrigerator is, you want to be very careful. Always cover them if you can or store them in a box. And I usually only store my fondant cakes overnight if I have to in the refrigerator. So let's go ahead and finish putting our flowers on here. They're a little wilty. Like I said, it is best to leave these dry out a little bit. And we'll go ahead and put one of our little cream color ones on here. And please let me know if you have any questions because we are getting ready to say our goodbyes. And if anything comes up, feel free to contact us with any questions that you have. Okay, so as you can see, I'm trimming these off. I'm going to be saving these ends because they are pretty soft here and I can go ahead and just rework them in. Okay, so ribbon roses, absolutely beautiful. I recommend exploring these. They're quick, they're easy, everyone loves them, and they look absolutely beautiful cascading down a cake. Okay, so we're going to trim this up, put our last little blue rose on here. And keep in mind, when you're making cakes like this and you're working with food, it's not always going to be very perfect. So don't worry if you have little bumps and things. And as long as you don't have, a chunk taken out of one side of the cake, it'll really go unnoticed. So what I'm doing with my leaves, since they're still pretty soft, I'm bending them a little bit. And we do have another question.
Have you ever made mirror icing?
The question is have I ever made mirror icing? That's a little bit different chocolate product, and you can pour it on the cake. It's similar to ganache, but ganache is a little bit semi-soft, and it's typically called a mirror glaze. So if you have any questions on mirror glaze, be sure to message me, and I can get you some recipes too. Okay, so I'm just kind of bending some of these leaves, kind of giving this cake its finishing touches. And we've got a few leaves here. Oh, maybe we'll move that one back here. Okay, guys, we're getting ready to say our goodbyes. It's been great seeing you today, and I'll see you again next time, okay? Here's our fondant roses on our simple ganache cake. Super easy to do. I made them while you guys are watching today. Let them set up a little bit next time. It's going to be a little easier to assemble them on your cake. We'll see you next time, okay? Bye.